The home hummed with the quiet rhythm of daily chores, the ticking of the kitchen wall clock echoing against the worn cupboards where Maggie Harlow leaned. At the sink, her auburn hair was gathered in a loose knot, a fine sheen of sweat glistening on her brow. She faced the faucet that had been persistently dripping throughout the morning. After weeks of being overlooked, she decided to take matters into her own hands. On the counter, her small toolbox, a chaotic collection of inherited wrenches and screwdrivers, lay open as she knelt awkwardly to examine the space beneath the sink. As she shifted, her knees emitted a creaking sound, and with a determined grip on the wrench, she exerted considerable force, prompting the pipe to groan in response. Before she had the chance to reply, her arm accidentally slipped into the tight space, becoming stuck between two rusted fittings. Frustration washed over her as she instinctively tried to pull back, only to find her arm caught in an unexpected grip. A fleeting wave of panic washed over her as she yanked harder, the jagged edges of the pipe digging into her skin. The discomfort was sharp yet manageable. Yet, it was the overwhelming feeling of helplessness that twisted her stomach, forcing her to lean back in discomfort. In her quest to find a better standing, Maggie's attempts only intensified her predicament. With her eyes shut tight, she took a deep breath, letting it out slowly to find her center once more. She pondered, her phone lying on the counter just beyond her reach. A soft glow radiated from the screen, a message notification gently pulsing with anticipation. She regretted her stubbornness in trying to handle the repair by herself. It transcended mere financial conservation, it was a testament to her capability. Handle issues autonomously. Following the loss of her husband, she devoted the past year to rebuilding her sense of independence. In the quiet kitchen, a sense of confinement and vulnerability washed over her, stirring an unsettling mix of irritation and shame as the front door creaked open, catching her off guard. Maggie's heart raced, and for a fleeting moment, she found herself frozen, her thoughts swirling with inquiries about the mysterious presence that had intruded. The soft thump of footsteps resonated, careful yet determined, as they moved through the corridor. With every ounce of focus, she strained to catch a glimpse of the intruder, her pulse quickening in response. Maggie, a voice echoed, rich and known, bringing forth a surge of relief as she identified it. Caleb Larson, the son of her late husband's dearest companion, was a thoughtful young man in his early 20s. Since the funeral, he had remained a steady figure in her life, helping with small tasks and occasionally checking in on how she was doing. Maggie had always cherished his kindness, but she had not foreseen his arrival today. She shouted. Caleb stepped into the doorway moments later, his voice carrying a mix of relief and shame. His tall frame filled the small space, and his hazel eyes widened slightly as he took in the surroundings. Maggie crouched awkwardly next to the sink, her arm caught beneath the chandelier. A faint shimmer of apprehension brightened her cheeks. What occurred? He approached, concern etched deeply into his expression. Maggie admitted, her cheeks flushing, that she found herself caught while trying to fix the pesky pipe. This complexity took me by surprise. Caleb knelt beside her, each movement measured and intentional. Let me take a closer look, he murmured, his voice calm and reassuring. He stretched out his fingers. As he examined the pipe, his hand lightly grazed hers. The brief contact sent a surprising jolt of excitement through Maggie. It's rather constricted, Caleb remarked, a slight furrow forming on his brow. I shall endeavor to ease it. Maggie complied, holding her position without movement. Her throat felt dry as she watched him closely. With each movement, his hands exhibited a calm precision, and his concentration held firm as he deftly maneuvered the wrench. She noted the crease in his brow, a sign of his deep focus, and the faint scent of cologne that lingered in the air around them, crafting an unforeseen and intimate moment. After several tense minutes, Caleb noted as the pipe finally gave way with a metallic groan, permitting Maggie's arm to slip free. She released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She flexed her fingers tentatively and murmured, "Thank you." Her voice has grown softer. Your assistance has been invaluable, and I truly cannot imagine how I would have navigated without it. Caleb offered a bright smile that momentarily eased the atmosphere. He expressed his satisfaction in being able to help. However, it might be best to reach out to me before you begin next time." In her portrayal of a plumber, Maggie let out a chuckle that felt almost foreign after weeks of isolation, remarking with a more buoyant tone. Caleb stood up, reaching out his hand toward her. Maggie took a moment to gather herself before reaching out her hand to offer assistance. The lingering warmth of his touch remained long after she let go, a subtle nuance that unsettled her more than she cared to admit. "How are you doing?" Caleb asked. His tone shifted back to one of genuine worry. His eyes searched for hers, and Maggie sensed a silent question lingering in the space that separated them. "I'm fine," she replied, quickly running her hands over her trousers to smooth out any wrinkles. "Feeling quite embarrassed?" "Feeling a deep sense of shame." Caleb spoke softly, assuring that there was no cause for worry. "Everyone occasionally needs a bit of help," Maggie conceded. Yet, the term echoed deeply within her. She had devoted so much time to demonstrating her independence, insisting that she could manage everything by herself. In this moment, with Caleb standing in her kitchen, his presence felt both steady and grounding. She couldn't help but appreciate the comfort of having someone to lean on as he moved to tidy up the scattered tools. Maggie found herself captivated, watching him work. Her mind was a tempest of appreciation and an elusive feeling she struggled to identify. The fragility of the present, the subtle closeness of their exchange. It departed from her. She felt a sense of vulnerability that caught her off guard as the clock on the wall ticked softly, signaling the relentless passage of time. Yet, Maggie barely registered that the morning had shifted in an unexpected direction as she lingered in the stillness of the kitchen. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was merely the start of something much more intricate. The kitchen felt different now, though Maggie couldn't quite identify the reason behind it. The air was thick with a delicate sense of vulnerability, while the morning sun poured in, casting light on every corner of the room, as if uncovering secrets long kept in the shadows. She lingered at the sink, lost in thought. Maggie gazed vacantly at her arm, where subtle red marks from the pipe lingered. The gentle sting acted as a reminder of the previous turmoil, but it was not the ache in her arm that truly unsettled her. It was Caleb, still kneeling by the cabinet, meticulously organizing the tools back into her mismatched toolbox. His movements were deliberate, his focus unwavering. But there was a subtle energy between them that captivated her. Maggie found herself watching him, her gaze lingering longer than intended. She reassured herself that it was merely gratitude for his assistance. But a part of her recognized that there was something deeper at play. "You are fortunate that things did not go further," Caleb said, breaking the stillness. His voice was calm and steady, although it had an underlying sense of anxiety or displeasure. Maggie blinked, rousing herself from her reverie. She said hastily that I ought to have just contacted someone. "Yes," Caleb agreed, looking up at her with a faint smile. "You should have." His tone was teasing, but his hazel eyes held a warmth that made Maggie's chest tighten. She forced a laugh, brushing her hands against her jeans as though trying to shake off the weight of the moment. "Well, now I know better," she said, her voice lighter than she felt. Caleb finished packing the toolbox and stood, his tall frame making the small kitchen feel even smaller. He held the box in one hand, his other resting casually on his hip. "Where do you want this?" he asked, gesturing to the toolbox. "Just leave it on the counter," Maggie replied, motioning vaguely. "I'll put it away later," Caleb nodded, setting the box down with a soft thud. He lingered by the counter for a moment, his gaze drifting around the room before settling back on her. "Are you really all right?" he inquired, his voice gentler this time. Maggie paused, her breath hitching as she locked eyes with him. His gaze held a disarming quality, steady and unwavering, as if he could penetrate the wall she had meticulously constructed over the years. It left her feeling bare and unprotected in a manner she was unaccustomed to. "Fine." At last, she spoke. Her voice was resolute yet lacked persuasion. Caleb tilted his head slightly, a contemplative look crossing his face. "You can choose not to engage with me." She realized that acknowledging the need for assistance was not a sign of weakness, rather, it resonated profoundly within her. Maggie averted her gaze, her fingers gripping the edge of the sink as she sought to regain her composure. "Thank you for that acknowledgement." She spoke softly, "Yet I've grown accustomed to managing everything by myself." "You don't have to," Caleb said, stepping closer. His voice remained steady, yet it carried a newfound intensity, a subtle urgency that caused her heart to tighten. "It's not necessary to tackle everything by yourself." Maggie's eyes darted back to him, her vibrant green gaze locking onto his hazel one. She felt the urge to argue, to express that he didn't truly understand, yet the sincerity in his expression rendered her words trapped in her throat. Instead, she tilted her lips, forming a subtle, hesitant smile. Theong murmured, her voice scarcely rising above a whisper. Caleb offered a warm smile in response. A slight, boyish grin that eased the tension in the room, making the moment feel a bit lighter whenever he simply remarked that it lingered. The quiet that enveloped them was heavy with things left unsaid. Maggie sensed her heart racing, her mind a flurry as she endeavored to unravel the tumult of feelings within her. Thankfulness, a sense of ease, a comforting warmth, a weighty presence. Everything was intertwined, creating a sense of unease within her. Caleb cleared his throat, taking a small step back, as if he could feel her unease. "I should probably get going," he said, his tone relaxed, yet his eyes remained intent on hers. "Absolutely," Maggie replied hastily, her tone laced with anxiety. "I'm sure you have things to do," Caleb remarked, though his tone suggested a hint of doubt. He hesitated for a brief moment before giving a nod. "If you require anything, you know how to reach me." Maggie nodded, her throat constricting as she observed him pivot and make his way to the door. She trailed behind him into the front hall. Her footsteps were slow and deliberate as he approached the door, pausing to glance back at her with an expression that eluded her understanding. "Please take care of yourself, Maggie," he said gently. "I will," she replied, her voice a mere whisper. And then he vanished, the door whispering shut in his wake. Maggie lingered in silence, her gaze fixed intently. In the void left behind, the house enveloped her in an eerie silence, the stillness bearing down on her as if it were a tangible burden. She pivoted back to the kitchen, her footsteps weighted with an effort to dispel the persistent unease. Yet, as she lingered by the sink, gazing out at the sun-drenched yard, the racing of her heart and the relentless thoughts swirling in her mind became impossible to dismiss. Caleb's words, his touch, the way he had gazed at her. Everything seemed to carry a weight of importance that she struggled to articulate. Maggie let out a deep breath, her hands shaking as they rested on the counter, uncertainty about the future weighing heavily on her mind. Yet, she sensed that a change had occurred, and there was no turning back. The late afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, casting soft, fragmented beams across the living room floor. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant chirping of birds outside. Maggie sat on the sofa, a steaming cup of tea cradled in her hands. She had been staring at the same page of her book for nearly 20 minutes, her eyes skimming over the words without absorbing a single one. Her thoughts wandered, particularly to Caleb, ever since he had departed that morning. His words and the subtle power of his presence resonated within her. He possessed a certain charm that was both captivating and unsettling, leaving her at a loss for how to articulate the feelings it stirred within her. She reassured herself it was merely gratitude for his assistance, yet beneath the surface, she recognized that it was the sound of the front door creaking open that truly unsettled her. Startled from her reverie, Maggie tensed, placing her tea on the coffee table as her heart raced. She hadn't anticipated any visitors, and for a fleeting moment, panic surged within her, an irrational fear that something was amiss. Yet, in that moment, she caught the sound of Caleb's voice, enveloping her in its warmth and familiarity, echoing from the hallway. "He spoke to me," his tone relaxed. Maggie released a deep breath, letting her shoulders drop. With a sense of ease, she rose, her hands gliding over her jeans as she made her way to the doorway. Caleb called. "What is it? What brings you here?" He emerged in the entryway, a subtle smile gracing his lips. He raised a small plastic bag that he had left in the kitchen. "He mentioned that he assumed I would take care of dropping it off." Maggie furrowed her brow, moving in closer. Within the confines of the bag lay a jar of honey, a faint memory of having set it aside during their tidying efforts surfacing in her mind. Her lips curled into a smile, touched by his considerate nature. "You really didn't need to do that," she remarked, accepting the bag from him. "I happened to be in the neighborhood," he said with a casual shrug, yet the way his eyes held on to her suggestion hinted at something more. "Thank you, Maggie," she said, her voice gentle. She gestured toward the living room. "Would you like to take a moment to sit down? I have just brewed a cup of tea." Caleb paused briefly, then gave a nod of agreement. "Of course," he replied. A moment of respite would be welcome. They transitioned to the living room, where an unspoken tension lingered in the air, both reluctant to confront it. Maggie poured him a cup of tea. Her movements were careful and deliberate, as if this simple act demanded her complete focus when she handed him the cup. As their fingers grazed lightly against one another, a subtle spark coursed through her. An ephemeral yet undeniable feeling that sent her heart racing. They sat facing one another, the coffee table serving as a barrier that felt both essential and stifling. For a moment, they sipped their tea in quietude. The heaviness of unvoiced reflection saturating the atmosphere. Maggie sensed Caleb's eyes on her, his gaze unwavering and probing, causing her chest to constrict. "You appear to be lost in thought," he remarked, finally shattering the stillness. "Maggie, raise your gaze to meet mine with those captivating green eyes." Meeting his was simply exhausting, she offered the excuse, a sense of emptiness washing over her as the words left her lips. Caleb nodded, yet his expression remained contemplative. "You've endured so much," he said softly. "It's perfectly natural to experience feelings of being overwhelmed." The genuine quality of his voice took her by surprise, and she sensed a tightness in her throat. She averted her eyes, her focus drifting to her hands as she sought to regain her composure. "I'm fine," she declared, her voice more resolute now. "Honestly, there's no need for that," Caleb remarked, his voice gentle yet firm. "Not alongside me." Maggie's breath caught at his words, and a surge of emotions welled up inside her, gratitude, vulnerability, and an enticing warmth that hinted at something more perilous. She glanced over her shoulder at him, her heart constricting as she noticed the worry etched in his hazel eyes. "Why are you so generous towards me?" she inquired, her voice scarcely rising above a whisper. Caleb paused, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. He let his eyes fall to his knees for a brief moment before lifting them back to her. "Because you deserve it," he said simply. The words lingered in the air, heavy with meaning. Maggie's throat constricted, and she fought to hold back the tears that were on the verge of spilling over. She hadn't experienced this moment, this sense of comprehension, in years. It was both frightening and thrilling simultaneously. "Thank you," she said at last, her voice quivering with the weight of it all. Caleb offered a subtle, heartfelt smile that tugged at her heart whenever they fell into silence once more. Yet, on this occasion, it seemed distinct. The tension lingered, yet it was softened by a silent comprehension, a fleeting connection that both were reluctant to let go of. Maggie observed him intently, picking up on nuances she had previously overlooked. The subtle stubble adorning his jawline, the gentle cascade of hair brushing against his forehead, and the depth in his eyes that conveyed a blend of wisdom and vulnerability. "You've grown up so much," she said softly, the words escaping her lips. Before she could intervene, Caleb let out a soft, rich chuckle that sent a delightful shiver down her spine. "I suppose I have," he remarked, "yet you remain the same resilient, determined, remarkable individual." Maggie's cheeks turned a deep shade of crimson as she averted her gaze, her heart racing wildly. She experienced an unusual blend of embarrassment and a deeper warmth, something she couldn't quite articulate. "Don't give me too much credit," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm not sure that I..." Did Caleb respond? His tone conveys sincerity. The words hit her with the force of a thunderclap, leaving her momentarily speechless as she realized the disparity between her self-perception and his insight. She gazed up at him, her emerald eyes shimmering with surprise, and for an instant, time appeared to freeze. The atmosphere surrounding them crackled with an undeniable intensity, filled with feelings they found impossible to overlook. Maggie's thoughts swirled chaotically, filled with anxieties and endless possibilities. She felt the urge to speak, to shatter the silence that hung heavy in the air, yet the right words eluded her grasp. Instead, she remained motionless, her heart racing as she struggled to comprehend the situation, and then Caleb's voice broke through, gentle yet firm, "Maggie." He uttered her name, imbued with a heaviness that caused her heart to throb. "Your brilliance truly shines, and I believe it's important for you to be aware of that." Maggie's breath hitched, and she sensed a solitary tear tracing its path down her cheek. She lifted her hand to brush it aside, her fingers quivering with uncertainty. "You have no idea how much that means to me," she said, her voice trembling. "I believe I do," Caleb replied, his eyes steady and resolute. The room descended into silence once more, yet this silence brimmed with potential. Maggie was uncertain of what lay ahead, but one truth resonated clearly within her. All had transformed. The house was enveloped in the profound silence that descends with the arrival of night, a stillness that appeared to magnify every noise from beyond its walls. A gentle breeze stirred among the trees, casting their shadows upon the windows, akin to murmurs from an invisible entity. The atmosphere was thick with an intensity that neither Maggie nor Caleb felt bold enough to confront head-on. Maggie nestled in the corner of the living room, a book resting untouched in her lap. The words on the cover blurred as her thoughts raced, too loud to focus on anything else. The dim light of the table lamp cast soft golden hues across the room, but the warmth of the glow did little to ease the chill that had settled deep within. Caleb's movements echoed from the kitchen, punctuated by the soft clink of glass and the steady flow of water from the sink. His presence brought both solace and provocation, a poignant reminder of all the unspoken words that lingered between them as he stepped into the living room. The gentle creaking of the floorboards beneath his feet sent a thrill through her heart. Maggie gazed into his hazel eyes, her own green ones locking onto his, and in that instant, the room felt as though it was closing in around them. Caleb lingered in the doorway, his tall silhouette bathed in the soft glow of the light. Emerging from the kitchen behind him, he appeared uncertain, almost fragile, as if caught in a moment of contemplation between advancing or pulling back. "May I take a seat here?" inquired, his tone gentle. Maggie nodded, a hint of hesitation in her demeanor, her throat constricting with emotion. She motioned toward the armchair opposite her, and Caleb approached it, settling into the seat with a measured caution that made the coffee table between them feel like a delicate divide, containing the heaviness of all they were sidestepping. For a moment, neither of them uttered a word, the silence hung heavy and suffocating, as if the very walls of the house were poised, anticipating the moment one of them would shatter it. Maggie's grip on her knuckles tightened, turning pale as she fought to articulate her thoughts. "Caleb," she started, her voice trembling, "we need to talk." His eyes narrowed, the uncertainty in his face giving way to a more intense awareness. He inclined his body forward, placing his elbows gently on his knees. Maggie's chest tightened further at the simplicity of her trembling hands as she clasped them together in her lap. "I don't even know where to begin," she confessed, her voice scarcely rising above a whisper. "Then allow me," Caleb said, his voice calm yet assertive. His hazel eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that suggested he was probing for something hidden within her expression. "I've been restraining myself because I didn't want to complicate things for you. Yet, I can no longer maintain the facade of indifference towards my true emotions." Maggie's breath caught in her throat, her heart racing within her chest like a frantic creature seeking freedom. She averted her eyes, letting them drift to the coffee table as she sought to regain her composure. "Caleb, this is intricate," she said, her voice quivering, "there are countless aspects we've overlooked." "I've taken everything into account," Caleb responded, his tone more resolute. "I've been reflecting on it constantly, every single moment spent in your presence. While I understand the complexity of the situation, that does not diminish its authenticity." Maggie shut her eyes, her heart heavy with the burden of his words. She felt the urge to dispute, to assert that he was mistaken. Yet, the reality was that she experienced it as well. The bond they shared, the magnetic force, appeared to bring them nearer with each encounter. It was impossible to overlook, regardless of her efforts to dismiss it. She inquired, her voice trembling just a bit, why are you sharing this with me at this moment? Because I can no longer hold it in, Caleb said, his voice gentle. I cannot remain in this space and pretend that everything is as it should be when, for me, it is not. Maggie gazed up at him, her emerald eyes shimmering with unshed tears. You don't understand, she said, her voice quivering. I have dedicated so much time to reconstructing my life to demonstrate that I am capable of doing this independently. And now you don't have to, Caleb interrupted gently, leaning forward, his hands resting on the edge of the coffee table. Maggie, you don't have to go through this alone. No matter what this is or what unfolds, I stand by your side. His words lingered in the atmosphere, laden with significance, and Maggie sensed a tear escape down her cheek. She lifted her hand to brush it aside, her fingers quivering, her voice a mere whisper as she confessed. I feel a deep apprehension about the implications this may have for us. I am too, Caleb said, his voice imbued with a quiet intensity, but I'd rather confront that fear than live a life filled with the haunting question of what could have been. Maggie's heart ached at the raw vulnerability in his tone. The unfiltered truth in his expression captivated her. She gazed deeply into his hazel eyes, recognizing the sincerity that resided there. Those same eyes had consistently reflected kindness and understanding, but now they conveyed something deeper, something more profound. I don't know if I can do this, she said finally, her voice quivering with uncertainty. I expressed my uncertainty about my strength. You are, Caleb stated confidently. You possess more strength than you realize. Reflect, and remember that you are not on this journey by yourself. We'll figure it out together. Maggie felt a tightness in her chest, her breath hitching as the weight of his words settled in. She longed to believe him, to embrace the hope of something good, something genuine, yet the fear of the unknown, the dread of potential loss, kept her rooted in uncertainty. Time is what we require, she stated. Her voice carries a newfound strength, urging a measured approach to uncover the truth of the situation. Caleb nodded, his demeanor shifting to one of gentleness. He spoke softly, I'll follow your lead. Whatever you require, Maggie, I am at your service. The earnestness in his voice and the subtle resolve in his gaze stirred a deep ache within her chest. She extended her fingers, lightly grazing his hand in a hesitant display of trust. For a fleeting moment, the world around them appeared to pause, the air thick with unexpressed feelings as the clock on the mantel chimed gently. As the hour struck, Maggie understood that this dialogue was merely the start of something greater. The road ahead lay shrouded in uncertainty, brimming with challenges and decisions yet to be revealed. Yet, for the first time in ages, she sensed a spark of hope, a delicate, flickering light amidst the enveloping darkness. The night was unusually silent, a stillness that magnified every creak of the house and each breath resonating within its confines. Maggie sat in solitude in the living room, the gentle illumination of the lamp creating elongated shadows that danced across the space. The book she had tried to immerse herself in earlier rested neglected on the coffee table, its pages spread wide like an unanswered query. She gazed at the shadowy window, her image barely visible on the surface, and for the first time in years, she sensed a profound vulnerability, not to the outside world but to her own essence. Her thoughts were a labyrinth, each twist and turn drawing her back to Caleb. His words from their last conversation resonated in her mind, their raw honesty and vulnerability slicing through the defenses she had meticulously constructed over the years. She had always taken pride in her independence, in her capacity to face life's challenges on her own, yet now she found herself re-evaluating everything she believed about strength and solitude. The soft echo of footsteps ascending the stairs interrupted her daydream, causing Maggie's heart to race and her breath to hitch in her throat. She felt unprepared to confront him, not this evening, not when her feelings were so exposed, yet there was no way to avoid it. Caleb's presence in the house loomed large, and she understood that they could no longer dance around the palpable tension that existed between them. My footsteps echoed with increasing freedom until they came to a halt just outside the living room. Maggie tilted her head just enough, her eyes locked onto the doorway. Caleb emerged shortly after, his towering figure cast in shadow by the faint glow of the hallway light. He paused briefly, his hazel eyes probing hers as if asking for the go-ahead to step into her world, unable to find rest. he inquired gently, his tone calm yet unwavering. Maggie shook her head, her lips curving into a faint, humorless smile that seemed to echo a recurring theme. Not long ago, she responded, and Caleb entered the room, his movements cautious, nearly hesitant. He lingered by the armchair, not taking a seat immediately, as if he were awaiting her invitation to step deeper into her world. The atmosphere surrounding them was thick, brimming with unvoiced sentiments and feelings. Neither of them possessed the ability to express themselves clearly. "Do you want to talk about it?" Caleb asked, his tone gentle yet firm. Maggie averted her eyes, her focus drifting down to her hands, which were tightly clenched in her lap. "I'm not sure if discussing this will make a difference," she confessed. "It seems that with each conversation, the intricacies only deepen." Caleb remarked that clarity often emerges only after things become complicated. His voice carried a subtle determination as he settled into the armchair opposite her, leaning in just a bit with his elbows on his knees. "Yet we can't continue to sidestep this. Maggie, that's no longer the case." Her chest constricted at his words, an intertwining surge of fear and relief flooding through her. For an extended period, she had been evading her emotions, persuading herself that suppressing them was the most secure choice. Yet, Caleb's constant presence and his unyielding patience rendered it futile to continue fleeing. "You don't understand," she said. At last, her voice quivered. "You cannot comprehend the depth of this fear, the sensation that everything you have painstakingly constructed could disintegrate in a heartbeat." Caleb's hazel eyes softened as he extended his hand, gently resting it on the edge of the coffee table that separated them. "Then allow me to comprehend," he stated. "Please allow me entry, Maggie. I'm present because I choose to be, because you matter to me, yet I require you to communicate with me." As her breath caught, her heart heavy. With the gravity of his words, she gazed at him, truly gazed at him, and perceived the subtle strength in his demeanor. The very strength that had captivated her in ways she had yet to fully recognize was now a source of uncertainty. "I don't know how to do this," she confessed, her voice barely rising above a whisper. "I'm unsure about how to open up to someone." Caleb's eyes remained steadfast. His expression remained calm and comforting, conveying that it was okay not to have all the answers. "He assured me that we would navigate this together, emphasizing that I need not face it by myself." The authenticity in his voice and the steadfast resolve in his gaze caused her throat to constrict. A tear escaped down her cheek, and she raised her hand to brush it away, her fingers quivering with emotion. "You make it sound so simple," she said, her voice trembling. "It's not easy," Caleb stated, his voice steady yet kind, "but it's worthwhile, you are worthwhile." Maggie's chest throbbed with a blend of fear and yearning that surged within her. She yearned to believe him, to embrace the hope of something good, something genuine, yet the barriers she had constructed around her heart loomed tall, and the thought of allowing them to fall felt like an insurmountable challenge. "I'm scared," she admitted at last, her voice quivering. "I feel a deep sense of fear about the implications of this and the potential impact it could have on us." Caleb nodded, a contemplative look crossing his face. "I'm scared too," he admitted, "but I'd prefer to confront that fear than miss the opportunity to discover what this could become." His words lingered in the atmosphere, laden with significance, and Maggie experienced a spark of an emotion she hadn't encountered in years. Hope lingered, delicate and uncertain, yet it existed, causing her chest to constrict in a manner that was both agonizing and thrilling amidst the somber stillness. The gravity of their dialogue enveloped them, reminiscent of a silent tempest. Maggie gazed at Caleb, her green eyes probing his for answers she wasn't certain she was prepared to uncover. Yet, in his unwavering gaze, she sensed a comforting presence, a subtle strength that ignited her desire to embrace the uncertainty of where this might lead. She spoke at last, her voice gentle yet firm, declaring that she no longer wished to escape from it. Caleb's lips curled into a subtle smile, his relief apparent in the way his shoulders eased. "That was precisely what I needed to hear," he remarked. Maggie let out a long breath, feeling a burden ease from her chest, though fresh questions began to swirl in her thoughts. The road before her was shrouded in uncertainty, laden with challenges and unforeseen risks, yet for the first time in ages, she sensed a glimmer of possibility, a spark of light piercing through the shadows. The early morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a gentle golden glow that felt almost ethereal in the room. Maggie perched on the edge of the sofa, her fingers wandering along the rim of her mug, the tea within now a distant memory. Her reflection in the window, faint and ethereal, mirrored the tumultuous emotions swirling inside her. The house lay in stillness, interrupted only by the subtle creak of aged timber and the far-off melody of birds, yet the quietude felt anything but serene. The atmosphere crackled, filled with the weight of unspoken words. She had devoted the whole night to reflecting on their conversation, revisiting each word and every glance. The weight of Caleb's sincerity lingered, enveloping her like an unseen bond. There was no escaping the truth. A change had occurred in the dynamic between them. It was inescapable, like a force drawing them both into unknown depths, and that filled her with dread. The echo of footsteps making their way down the stairs interrupted her musings, precise and intentional. Maggie felt her pulse freeze, quickening in intensity. She was taken by surprise when he arrived so early. She was unready for this moment. The sound of footsteps approached, each echo resonating in her chest until Caleb finally emerged in the doorway. He stood barefoot, his dark hair tousled from slumber, clad in nothing but a fitted t-shirt and sweatpants that rested low on his hips. The gentle morning light highlighted the defined contours of his jaw, showcasing the effortless power in his physique. He appeared effortlessly relaxed, yet there was a purposeful intent behind his demeanor, his presence enveloping the room like a subtle tempest. I found myself unable to sleep as well. What? His voice was deep and somewhat raspy, sending a shiver through her that she wished he remained unaware of. Maggie. She cleared her throat, her fingers tightening around the mug as though it were a lifeline. Not really, she said, her voice calm yet subdued, too much weighing on my mind. Caleb responded, entering the room. He rested nonchalantly against the doorway, arms crossed over his chest. The motion captured her attention, revealing the delicate play of muscle beneath his shirt. She swiftly turned away from Ed's gaze, a flush creeping into her cheeks. He inclined his head just a bit, observing her with that familiar, silent intensity that consistently unraveled her composure. He noted that you had been awake throughout the night. You ought to have awakened me, Maggie. She managed a faint smile, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. What would that have accomplished? She inquired, her voice playful yet laced with an undercurrent of complexity. Caleb's lips curved into a subtle smile. Despite the seriousness in his gaze, he conceded that perhaps there was nothing at all. Yet, you would not have been solitary in your honesty. His voice resonated with a gentle strength that caused her heart to constrict. She averted her eyes, her focus shifting to the mug cradled in her hands. I have grown accustomed to solitude. She whispered softly, her words meant more for her own ears than his. Caleb remarked that it wasn't necessary for you to feel that way. His voice was steady, yet it carried an elusive quality that she couldn't quite identify. He approached with intention, each movement measured and purposeful. Maggie's heart raced, her breath halting as he stepped over the unspoken boundary she hadn't even known existed. He paused merely a foot away, his presence dominating the confined space. She could sense the warmth emanating from him, accompanied by the subtle aroma of cedar and something uniquely his. Maggie, he murmured, her name lingering on his lips with a gravity that sent a chill down her spine. We need to address this directly. Her heart raced with a chaotic beat that resonated in her ears. She gazed up at him, her emerald eyes locking onto his warm hazel ones. His gaze held no hesitation, only a quiet determination and an underlying intensity that made her breath catch, adding layers of complexity to the moment. She said, her voice quivering just a bit, you know, that I know. Caleb remarked in a tone that was both gentle and resolute, yet that doesn't diminish its reality. Maggie parted her lips, ready to protest and distance herself from him, yet the words eluded her grasp. He extended his hand, allowing it to graze softly against her arm. The touch was almost imperceptible, a mere whisper of contact, yet it coursed through her, igniting a jolt she couldn't dismiss. You feel it too? He stated, his voice calm and unwavering, not posing it as a question. It was a subtle, inescapable reality. Maggie's breath hitched, her chest constricting as she fought to regain her balance in a moment she wished to refute, to assert that he was mistaken. Yet, the intensity in his gaze and the quiet certainty in his voice rendered her defenseless. "Caleb," she began, her voice barely a whisper, but before she could continue, he stepped closer, his hand sliding from her arm to gently cradle her face. "Just tell me one thing," he said, his voice now softer, almost pleading. "Are you interested in this?" Her chest throbbed under the burden of his inquiry. The unfiltered vulnerability in his eyes left her feeling as though she were teetering on the brink of a precipice, the earth giving way beneath her. Yet, in his gaze, there was no trace of fear, only a profound patience, igniting a desire within her to leap forward. "I'm uncertain," she murmured, her voice quivering. "I'm uncertain about how to desire something without the fear of its potential loss looming over me." "There's no need for fear," Caleb reassured her, his thumb gently caressing her cheek. "Not alongside me." Maggie's determination shattered, a solitary tear tracing its path down her cheek. She extended her hand, her fingers gently wrapping around his wrist. "I'm uncertain about how to approach this task," she confessed, her voice trembling, "yet I refuse to flee any longer." "That was everything I needed to know," Caleb remarked. Gently, he leaned closer, his forehead barely touching hers as the moment lingered, the world around them dissolving into oblivion. Maggie shut her eyes, her breath intertwining with his, and for the first time in years, she experienced a sense of tranquility. The morning light streamed through the curtains, enveloping the room in a soft, golden embrace. Outside, life continued its relentless pace, oblivious to the shift that had occurred solely for Maggie. All had changed, and there was no way to return.